interesting. Uh, Tom has been a member of the Overmountain Victory Trail Association for around 12 years and fills in as a storyteller as needed. He is a retired engineer who wanted to do the annual commemorative march along the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail once, where his ancestors once rode to the Battle of Kings Mountain. 12 years later, he has found how fascinating history can be once you get beyond the dry facts presented in the history books. He has participated in two multi-day storytelling workshops sponsored by the National Park Service, presented by the National Storytelling Center of Jonesboro. He has presented programs taken from the diary of Uzzel Johnson, British surgeon assigned to Major Patrick Ferguson, as Colonel William Campbell, and as General Evan Shelby, father of Isaac Shelby, among others. He frequently has his horse with him, if at the Abington Muster Grounds. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom.
If you think this is an odd outfit for an Overmountain man, it is. Because what I decided to do today is wear an outfit that you would not have seen in this area, but it tells the story of the Southern campaign that was won by the men, the militia, from right here. And I like to say that this area, this region, was the beginning of the end of the American Revolutionary War. By the way, do any of you know what state the most battles in the Revolutionary War were fought?
South Carolina.
You're right. Somewhere between 200 and 600, depending on who's counting and how they're counting, more than in the Northeast in total. And why was that? How many of you have heard of George Washington? Stick your hands up. And that's the way I start, even for kindergartners, because they have heard of George Washington. It gives them a hook. They know something to begin with. How many of you have heard of Clinton? Not that Clinton. I saw it in the cartoon cloud above your head. Not Bill or Hillary. Sir Lord General Henry Clinton, the head of the British Army in the South, or in the continent. Washington and Clinton had fought to a standstill over 2 years. No successful battle that the Americans won. As a matter of fact, a year and a half, they hadn't had a battle because neither side was strong enough to take out the other. So they developed what was called the Southern Strategy, and that's where I come in, and I'm going to represent Uzzel Johnson today, British surgeon assigned to Ferguson, Patrick Ferguson. Now, I trained as a doctor in New Jersey, as did my two brothers, and I originally joined the Patriot side, the militia. But it wasn't long before I found that my sentiments really were with the King of England, so I switched sides to the New York Volunteers, a Tory supporter group. Now, it wasn't long after that before a grand jury indicted me for treason. But Henry Clinton decided he had to put an end to this war. So he put 7,000 of us, including me, on the ships, sailed out of New York Harbor day after Christmas, 1779, and I have never been on such rough waters in my entire life. That Atlantic, we lost horses, we lost ships, we lost supplies. Took us almost 2 months to beat down the coast until we could get down into South Carolina. We were headed toward Charleston. Finally landed, And I have never seen in my life worse ground to have a battle, to fight a war, wading through those swamps, and everything in those swamps either wanted to bite me, eat me, or sting me. It was miserable. It took us a month and a half to wade through those swamps before we finally got to that place called Charlestown. Now that's where General Lincoln had set up a defensive line. And they thought that they could keep the British out of the harbor. But those British captains are pretty good sailors. They got in. We came in on the land side under Ferguson. Now, we fought a lot of skirmishes to get there. Did you know that Major Ferguson even got bayoneted in the arm, and I had to patch him up from that, along with all of the rest of the wounds that people had? It was just constant. Moving every day, skirmishes and battles. We finally set up our lines outside Charleston. And started bombarding. And when we set their warehouses on fire, city fathers in Charleston made Lincoln surrender. They didn't want their goods burned. So we took control of Charleston. That was a pretty good success. Captured 7,000 of those rebels, put a lot of them on prison ships. I had to treat a lot of them. I had to treat a lot of our own men that got wounded. Lost men all as we went up through there. Not a whole lot. But taking over the South was going pretty good. A couple of weeks later, got orders to draw medical supplies for a 3-month campaign. So I did. Drew my medical supplies, packed everything up, was assigned to Patrick Ferguson. He was one of the commanders under Lord Cornwallis who was assigned to conquer the South. He had several commanders. Patrick Ferguson was a real interesting man to work for because he thought that if you treated people right, there would be a lot of goodwill for the British Army. And there was. Didn't hurt any that we'd already captured Charleston and Savannah and knocked out the entire Continental Army in the South. We would have hundreds of militia at a time come in to take protection from the king. But we had to move because our job was to come up the foothills along the mountains, protect Cornwallis's western flanks, and recruit. And Ferguson was a good recruiter. Did you know he recruited over 3,000 men to fight for the king as he came up through South Carolina and into North Carolina? Skirmishes. I don't know how many of you ever had to do it, but as we traveled, we had to live a lot off the land, forage for supplies. About every day we had to move, and it was hot in the South. So we'd get up, start moving 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, move 10, 15, 20 miles at a time. Might settle down during the hot of the day and then continue in the evening until we got to our next place. But every time we went, we'd have to watch out because those rebels, those militia, they'd hide. They'd take a shot at us. We'd try to chase them down and they disappeared. They wouldn't stand and fight like good British soldiers. Did not like that at all. Captured a lot of them. Captured a lot of them. Then we got word that Captain Anderson at a place called Fort Thickety surrendered his entire unit to this rebel, this thorn in our side, led by this Shelby from over the mountains. Captured that fort without firing a shot, we heard. That Anderson, with a well-defended fort, 60, 70 men, 200 stands of arms, just surrendered. Found out later that Shelby tricked him. Put up Quaker cannon. You know what Quaker cannon are? Logs painted like black that look like cannon out in the wood lines. Threatened to blow our fort up with those things. We didn't like Shelby at all. We didn't like those Overmountain men because they'd come over, they'd hit us, and they'd run. We got word that the Continentals had sent General Gates south to form another army. So Cornwallis went looking for him as we protected his left flank, western side. We heard later, a few days later, that Cornwallis had caught up with General Gates and his army at a place called Camden. Absolutely destroyed that army, we heard. We heard that Gates got on his horse and ran for over 200 miles, left his army to be slaughtered there on the field. I heard about the letter that Cornwallis sent to General Clinton up in New York, that there was no organized resistance left in the South. We'd capture groups. Yeah. One group we captured, fight. Captured 50 some of those rebels. We did. When we searched them, they had protections in their pockets. They had violated those protections. We hung 27 of them there. We sent the other 27 to Fort 96 down in South Carolina to be hung because they violated those protections. Another little skirmish we had, we captured over 100. Sentenced all to be hung. But our commander had mercy on them that time. He only hung 5 of them. We kept moving until we finally settled in a place called Gilberttown, over in the foothills of North Carolina. I'd been sick for a while. Me, the doctor, took some of my own medicine and it almost killed me. But we settled in at Gilberttown. And did you know that in one day, and this was in September, after Gates had fallen, his army had been destroyed at Camden, there were over 500 men that came in one day to take protection of the king. And oh, by the way, some of the women came in too to take protections of the king. We had those rebels on the run. We had this thing. It was well on the way to be ended. We stayed at Gilberttown for a while. Now, Patrick Ferguson would take his troops out. Why, he got all the way up into the foothill, up into the valleys of the mountains. Not sure whether he got to North Cove or he got up to a place on top of the mountain to Cathay's plantation. Cathay had two different plantations, one North Cove, one up Grassy Creek at what's now Spruce Pine. And that was about the time that we heard the militia, those Overmountain men from over the mountain that we didn't want over there, Shelby and all of those scoundrels, those backwater men, that they were planning on coming over and fighting us. So Ferguson issued a broadside to publish, to call on all loyal followers to rally to his flag. The backwater men have crossed the mountains. McDowell, Hampton, Shelby, Cleveland are at the head. So you know what you have to depend upon. If you choose to be degraded forever and ever by a set of mongrels, say so at once and let your women turn your backs upon you, and look out for real men. Signed by Major Patrick Ferguson, 71st Regiment Highlanders. And men rallied to our camp. We picked up a couple of deserters that came, told us about those Overmountain men plan, Chambers and Crawford. You know, Patrick Ferguson didn't trust them any more than he trusted any spy. So he held them captive, but he got their information. So he knew who was coming after him and how many were on the way. We kept moving. Finally had to move out of Gilberttown when we heard that bunch of rabble was coming over the mountain after us. And we moved slowly toward Cornwallis's lines in Charlottetown. And it had been raining, it was miserable, hard going, worn out, edge of the Carolinas, called Kings Mountain, and settled in on top of that mountain. It had been raining for about 3 days. 4 days. We set up our camp on top of that mountain. I treated people as they needed to be treated. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun came out. So Major Ferguson went through the camp, ordered everybody to lay out their equipment, lay out their powder, lay out their arms to get everything dried out. Because we knew from our spies that those Overmountain men had hunkered down in the rain over at a place called Cowpens, 30 miles away. So we knew they wouldn't be there today. Heard the first shot at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Ferguson came riding through, ordering everybody to get ready for battle, that rabble had attacked. An hour and 5 minutes later, my commander, Major Patrick Ferguson, lay dead on the ground. And because I was a better doctor than a lot of the militia doctors, so-called doctors, they made me treat all of their men first. And they promised me that if I did that I would be given privileges. If I didn't, I would be killed. So I treated their men, their wounded, their dying, before I could treat our own men. mountain was covered with dead men. 170, 180 hours. And we thought a like number of the militia, Ferguson's men. Ferguson's men had another 160, 180 wounded. About the same number of militia, and I would treat them all. But if I got caught treating one of my own men before I treated one of the militia, somebody would threaten me with my life. Next day, we set out marching with all of the prisoners, and I was still treating everybody. Didn't have any food. Went for 3 days without any food at all until we found a sweet potato patch. And Campbell and Shelby and all of them, they gave us permission to eat raw turnips or raw sweet potatoes. Kept moving. Till we got to this place called Biggerstaff's Oil Fields. Now those militia, they were just a mite irritated. And if somebody looked at them wrong, they'd shoot them. Got to Biggerstaff's Oil Fields. And Shelby, that rascal that had been a thorn in our side for years, found a copy of the North Carolina laws and determined that they could hold trials, legal trials, and they did. They sentenced 30 of our men to hanging there at that night under a big tree. Hung some of our fine commanders that people had grudges against. Hung 9 of them before the spell was broken. One of our men that was sentenced to be hung, don't rightly recall his name right now, but his brother came up to him while he was had the noose around his neck to give him a big hug, farewell. And when he did, he took his knife out and cut his bonds. Well, that guy jumped off his horse and ran out of the camp. Surprised everybody so much that he ran right through the middle of all of those militia and they didn't stop him. And after that, it broke the spell, and Shelby and the other commanders put a stop to the hangings. Well, I, as a doctor, remember those special privileges I told you I was supposed to have? They promised me I'd get to keep all of my baggage and all of my clothing and all of my goods. When we asked for clean clothes, I got a ragged, cut-up shirt, and that was it. But as we went on, prisoners were taken up. I went with them, did not try to escape because I had given my word, and my word was my bond. Finally made it to Hillsboro, and I was taken as a prisoner of war and held until the end of the war then. The rest of my story, unlike many of my fellow soldiers, I was able to settle back into my home, near my home in New Jersey, and I found a sponsor, a wealthy sponsor who protected me. And in trade, I was to see his family and all of his family members every day to check on them to see if there were any illnesses. I finally died an honorable death, still as a doctor, in 1827. And that is my story.